If y'all remember, a couple months back, I did a video that was coming out of DC where you had this former postal employee that worked for the United States Postal Service who had stole hundreds of thousands, maybe close to $1 million worth of checks out of customers' mail, and then tried to hightail it back to his homeland via plane before he was caught. Here we are a couple months later in Philadelphia, where we have this now former FedEx employee, or maybe soon will be, but by the time you see this video, he probably will be former, a FedEx employee by the name of Jordan Hamilton, who was charged after he was caught stealing allegedly more than $99,000 worth of gold coins from a package. And the thing is, like I said back then, it's not uncommon. This is not an uncommon practice. As a matter of fact, I actually know someone personally who works for the United States Postal Service. And when I told them about what happened, they was like, again? They was like, if you would only know how common this practice is when people do what they do as far as stealing checks and money out of people's envelopes. This is exactly why I prefer direct deposit. I understand some checks have to come in the mail, mainly if it's something coming from probably maybe the IRS, like a refund check of some sort, and that's probably when they are at its highest, when those refund checks come, because a lot of the times those do come in the mail. Unfortunately, I wish they would direct deposit, but it is what it is. But I'm gonna read this story that's coming from 6abc.com. A FedEx employee in Delaware has been arrested on firearm and felony theft charges. A Newcastle police said 27-year-old Jordan Hamilton of Wilmington was arrested for allegedly stealing over $99,000 worth of gold coins from a package. Police said they began investigating Hamilton in September and were able to execute a search warrant on his home, where they found stolen gold and silver. Police also found several firearms, including a 12-gauge shotgun with an obliterated serial number, as well as a 9mm handgun that was also reported stolen out of Philadelphia. Hamilton is facing multiple charges, including felony theft of property valued at greater than $50,000. He turned himself in on November 10th. His bail was set at $21,000 unsecured, and he was later released, because I'm pretty much sure he was able to afford that. FedEx released this statement to Action News on Hamilton's arrest. The safety and security of our customer shipments is a top priority, and we do not tolerate the use of our network for illegal purposes. We have fully cooperated with authorities in this investigation. You know what? I'm gonna say something that may sound controversial as it pertains to how they may end up dealing with these type of situations in the future going forward. You know how there's this talk about AI and, you know, technology and all of that stuff and replacing actual human employees? I wouldn't be surprised if they introduced an AI of some sort in order to protect these packages and get rid of the human employees to avoid having to deal with this. Because I'm gonna be honest, if I was the owner of this particular FedEx that this person worked for, I would be embarrassed, because then it's like they're gonna look at me like I don't know what I'm doing. If not the owner, at least the manager. Then they'll be like, or the person who hired this person, like, did you not do a thorough background check? And it's not always necessarily the case. They probably have a squeaky clean background, but they got tempted. The temptation was there to take that money or take those checks, or in his case, steal the gold and the silver. The temptation was there. It's not always necessarily they always been this way. It's just that the temptation was there and they probably got desperate. And of course, in that moment, they probably feel like they were not going to get caught. One thing that's different from his compared to the other one with the postal employee who worked for USPS is that this seems to me like it was a one-time thing. It's just that he came up majorly from this one-time hit, but his one-time lick. The other one, on the other hand, he was stealing checks for months at a time, probably well over a year. But back to the AI thing, don't be surprised if they try to say, okay, this is getting ridiculous. It's happening way too many times. We're gonna bring in these AI bots to do this work for us because this isn't working. And then you got to deal with, also on top of that, the customer's response, who's going to be rightfully outraged. They're going to want a lawsuit of some kind to come down against this particular FedEx that this person was working at. Not only the FedEx, but also the person that stole from them. Because the person at FedEx, the customer is not going to say, well, you know what, I'm not going to hold the FedEx accountable because it's not their fault, it's his fault. No, they're going to probably have a lawyer that suggests they go after FedEx too, because they're going to say, well, it is their fault because they hired this guy and didn't do a thorough background check, even though they did. And then they probably going to entice them, and then the customer's going to go after them too. So it's basically protecting one's self. And then on top of that, they said they found a whole bunch of firearms in this man's house with the serial number scratched off. And we know what that means. That means he didn't buy that from an actual shop. He did it the old school way and probably got it out of somebody's trunk. So he most likely has, of course, stolen firearms. We know what that means when they scratch that serial number off. So yeah, that's just something I'm throwing out there. It might be a little bit of a reach, but the way it's looking right now, who knows? I mean, if you go to a Walmart, I kid you not, when I was in South Carolina for my homecoming, I went to that Walmart at like maybe close to 9 in the morning, maybe. And when I got there, I was so surprised and shocked to see so many self-checkouts and self-lane checkouts. And if you don't know, the self-lane checkouts is basically, looks like a regular lane where a cashier will work at, but it's not, but it's a lane form. And then, of course, in the Walmart, they have that big square where all these self-checkout spots are at. And there was no cashier working at that time. A good 80% of it was self-checkout based, whether in that square or in the lane. In the areas that where the cashier would most likely be at, there was none. Now, I don't know if anyone came in later on as the day went on, but I know what I saw when I went up in there, and it blew my mind because I had never seen it like that before. I've seen where Walmart has it now, you know, in my area, but not like that. So don't be surprised if that's what it's going to be like going forward. And to avoid situations like what happened in this story and the one that I did about the USPS, if that goes forward. Now, this guy, apparently he might have been a driver, but they said he just was a FedEx, he was an employee. So but they didn't specify exactly what his position was, if he worked inside of the actual FedEx plant were in his location, or if he was a driver. It didn't specify, but if he worked in the plant, oh, trust and believe, they may, if they wanted to replace them in some way, form, or fashion to avoid this happening, they will find a way. They will get the resources and they will have it be done.